The invitation gleamed on my sleek glass desk, premium cream-colored cardstock, with pretentious gold embossing that caught the morning light streaming through my floor-to-ceiling windows. My stomach clenched instinctively. It was the exact same stationery my father had used to write my disownment letter 13 years ago. The bitter irony twisted in my chest like a knife. Please join us for the AI Innovation Summit at the Blackwood Conference Center at 7. Your presence would be particularly valuable, and scribbled in the corner, in my father's distinctive handwriting. We need to talk. Dominic, my executive assistant, watched my face carefully as I turned the invitation over in my trembling hands, my fingernails digging small crescents into the thick paper. "Are you actually considering attending this?" he asked, his voice laced with protective concern. I pushed away from my desk and swiveled my ergonomic chair to face the spectacular Seattle skyline. From my corner office in the Mercer Innovations headquarters, I could see the Space Needle piercing the morning fog while ferries crisscrossed the Sound below. "What do you honestly think, Dominic?" My voice came out sharper than intended. The pain still raw after all these years. After 13 years of complete radio silence, they suddenly want a family reunion at some tech conference. My name is Elise Blackwood, though I legally changed it to Mercer after my MIT graduation. Back then, I was just the idealistic older daughter who dared to question my father's unethical data mining practices and environmental policies. Now I'm Elise Mercer, founder and CEO of Mercer Innovations, valued at over $30 billion, and leading the industry in ethical AI and sustainable cloud services. And I've just finalized the strategy to acquire Blackwood TechMe family's rapidly failing company. The acquisition documents are ready for your final review, Dominic said, placing a sleek digital tablet before me displaying the contract files. Everything's aligned perfectly for next week's board presentation. I nodded absently, still staring at the invitation, feeling its weight in my hands like it was made of lead rather than paper. "Have you seen the latest analytics from Blackwood Tech?" Dominic swiped through several screens on his tablet. "Stock values plummeted 68% since last quarter. Your sister's Blackpad launch was an absolute disaster. Critics are calling it 5 years too late and 10 features too few. Industry insiders are whispering they won't even make next month's payroll." Natalie, my perfect younger sister with her Stanford MBA and designer wardrobe. The golden child who'd always done everything exactly according to our father's expectations. The daughter he'd chosen to lead the company, insisting she had the proper business mindset while claiming I was too emotional and idealistic. The same sister who'd sat in frozen silence, eyes downcast when he'd thrown me out for exposing the company's questionable data practices. "Book my private jet to Boston," I said finally, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Let's see what game they're playing this time." The gleaming glass and steel convention center buzzed with activity, hundreds of the tech industry's brightest minds networking. Deal-making and showcasing innovations. I felt dozens of eyes following me as I strode through the main hall. My confidence built over years of proving myself in an industry that had initially dismissed me. The contrast between our companies couldn't have been more stark. The Blackwood Tech booth stood nearly empty, their outdated hardware displays gathering dust while just across the hall. Crowds swarmed around Mercer Innovations' AI ethics demonstration and sustainable cloud computing exhibits. I spotted them before they saw me father, Victor Blackwood. His once jet black hair now silver, but his posture still militarily erect as he spoke with two investors who looked distinctly unimpressed. Natalie stood nearby, her blonde hair pulled into a perfect chignon, designer suit immaculate, but her eyes constantly checking her phone with unmistakable anxiety. And slightly apart from them, my mother, Corinne, elegant as always in her conservative attire, her academic brilliance hidden behind years of playing the supportive corporate wife. Dominic had insisted on accompanying me as backup, his words. I was grateful for his steady presence as I approached the Blackwood Tech VIP lounge. The company's security guard, not recognizing me, stepped forward. "Excuse me, ma'am. This area is for Blackwood representatives only." "She is a Blackwood," my father's authoritative voice cut through the background chatter. He had spotted me. "Ms. Mercer," I corrected him firmly, the name feeling like armor around my wounded heart. His eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded curtly. "Of course. My apologies, Ms. Mercer. Please join us." The VIP lounge, where Blackwood Tech always hosted its most important clients and made its crucial business decisions, where my father had coldly informed me 13 years ago that my betrayal meant I was no longer welcome in his home or his company. I straightened my custom-tailored navy suit and followed him into the luxurious space, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. Industry magazines were scattered across the tables, the latest issue of Tech Visionary prominently displayed, with Natalie's airbrushed face on the cover under the headline, "The Blackwood Legacy, Can the Dynasty's Heir Save a Fading Giant?" My face was conspicuously absent from any company materials, my existence thoroughly erased from the family narrative. My father gestured toward the private conference room. Inside, Natalie perched nervously on the edge of a leather chair, her manicured nails tapping restlessly against her tablet. My mother stood by the window, her eyes meeting mine with a flash of something I couldn't quite identify. Regret? Hope? She quickly looked away. "Elise," my father said stiffly. "Thank you for coming." I remained in the doorway, unwilling to fully enter their space, my body instinctively maintaining distance. Well, when the mighty Victor Blackwood practically commands an appearance, how could I possibly decline? The sarcasm dripped from every word, burning like acid on my tongue. Natalie visibly flinched at my tone. Father's jawline hardened, the muscle there twitching. But he managed to keep his composure. "Please sit down. We have significant matters to discuss," he said, gesturing to the empty chairs. I deliberately chose the chair closest to the exit, crossing my legs and waiting in loaded silence. The tension in the room was suffocating, like invisible hands around my throat. Finally, my father cleared his throat and spoke. "We've been monitoring your impressive success over the past few years." I raised a perfectly arched eyebrow, my stomach churning with old anger. "My impressive success? You mean building a $30 billion industry-leading company from literally nothing, while you were training Natalie to run Blackwood Tech straight into financial ruin?" "Elise, please," my mother interjected softly, her first words to me in over a decade. "We're attempting to have a productive conversation here." "Productive?" I laughed, the sound hollow and painful even to my own ears. "Like the productive way you all watched in silence while father disowned me? Or the productive way you've all pretended I simply don't exist for 13 years? Natalie suddenly stood up, her designer heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floor. "We made terrible mistakes, okay? Is that what you need to hear? We were completely, totally wrong." Her voice cracked with emotion. I studied my sister carefully, seeing past the expensive facade for the first time. Her perfect blonde hair was still immaculately styled, but dark circles shadowed her eyes despite her concealer's best efforts. Her shoulders were tight with unmistakable stress, her hands trembling slightly as she gesticulated. Leading a failing tech company had clearly taken its toll on the golden child. "Why exactly am I here?" I asked pointedly, turning back to my father. He sighed heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. "Blackwood Tech is facing significant challenges. We need your expertise." And there it was. Not a heartfelt apology, not an acknowledgement of the deep wounds they'd inflicted, just another calculated business transaction. My heart ached with disappointment I hadn't known I could still feel. "My expertise," I repeated, keeping my voice deliberately neutral while emotions stormed inside me. "What specific kind of expertise are you seeking?" "We've closely observed what you've accomplished with Mercer Innovations," he said, his businessman mask firmly in place. "The groundbreaking innovation, the remarkable growth rates, the ethical AI frameworks. We need that kind of forward thinking at Blackwood Tech. And what exactly are you offering in exchange for my hard-earned knowledge?" "A strategic partnership," Natalie jumped in eagerly, her desperation barely concealed, "co-CEO position with equal authority in determining the company's future direction." I nearly laughed out loud, my chest tight with disbelief. They had absolutely no idea how close they were to having zero say whatsoever in the company's future. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," I said, standing up, feeling my anger rise like a physical force. For 13 years, I was the family embarrassment. The naive idealist who didn't understand real business, the daughter unworthy of the precious Blackwood name. But now that you're facing bankruptcy, suddenly my ideas and leadership are valuable enough to share power? That's not a fair assessment. Natalie protested, her perfect composure fracturing. The circumstances are entirely different now. "Different?" I turned to her, my voice rising despite my best efforts to remain calm. "Different exactly how?" "Because you failed spectacularly at the position handed to you without any merit." Because you couldn't handle the responsibility you were so convinced you deserved more than me. That's quite enough. My father's commanding voice sliced through the tension. We're extending an olive branch here, Elise. A chance to come back to Blackwood, to be part of this family again. I reached for my sleek leather briefcase, pulling out the acquisition documents I'd brought along, anticipating this exact moment. That's a surprisingly generous offer, Dad. But I've prepared an alternative proposal. I placed the papers deliberately on the conference table, watching intently as he picked them up. The blood drained from his face as his eyes scanned the contents. What in God's name is this? His voice was barely above a whisper. The inevitable future of Blackwood Technologies, I said calmly, my heart racing despite my composed exterior. Mercer Innovations has been strategically acquiring shares through various front companies for the past 8 months. After next week's board meeting, we'll control the majority interest in your company. Natalie snatched the papers from our father's trembling hands, her eyes darting frantically across the pages. This is absolutely impossible. You can't possibly... Can't what exactly? I interrupted, my voice dangerously soft. Can't out-strategize the mighty Blackwoods. Can't build something exponentially more successful than you. Can't claim everything you always assumed was rightfully yours. My father stood up, his face flushed with fury. You orchestrated this entire scheme. All of it. No, Dad, I said, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. You orchestrated this the moment you declared that Natalie was more deserving of your trust, your approval, your legacy simply because she never questioned your outdated methods or unethical practices. You set this in motion 13 years ago when you threw out my AI cloud integration proposal, saying women lack the technical understanding for complex systems architecture. Remember that? The same system architecture that's now the foundation of our $30 billion company and the industry standard you failed to adopt. We'll contest this aggressively, he threatened, his fist clenching. We have the best corporate attorneys in the country. Yes, you certainly did, I agreed with a cold smile. The same attorneys who helped me structure this acquisition. Turns out loyalty follows innovation and financial stability, another valuable lesson I learned from watching you. The silence in the room was absolute oppressive. My mother had gone completely still, her knuckles white as she gripped her designer handbag. Natalie looked physically ill, collapsed back into her chair. And my father, he kept staring at the acquisition documents as if his formidable will alone could somehow alter their contents. The board meeting is scheduled for 9:00 a.m. Next Tuesday, I said, standing up and smoothing my suit jacket. I recommend you use the weekend to process and prepare for the transition. Please, my mother finally spoke again, her voice quavering with emotion. Elise, we're still your family, regardless of everything. I turned to her, feeling ancient pain resurface like a physical wound reopened. Family? Where exactly was this family when Dad threw me out for exposing unethical data harvesting? When Natalie claimed everything that should have been shared between us? When I was working 18-hour days trying to build something meaningful on my own? You clearly never needed our support, Natalie said quietly, a hint of admiration breaking through her shock. Look at the incredible empire you've created. I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter, echoing in the luxurious room. You honestly think Mercer Innovations materialized by magic? I lived in a studio apartment the size of your walk-in closet for 3 years. I survived on ramen and coffee while coding until my fingers cramped every night. I pitched to over 200 investors before finding anyone who would take a chance on a naive young woman with big ideas. And you know what fueled me through all those crushing defeats and exhausting days? The absolute certainty that someday I'd be powerful enough to make you all truly see exactly what you had thrown away. My father finally recovered his voice. So this is your elaborate revenge? No, Dad. This is simply good business. Isn't that precisely what you always preach to us? Never allow sentimentality to cloud sound judgment. I collected my belongings with deliberate calm. Blackwood Technologies is failing because you refuse to innovate beyond hardware when the world moved to cloud services. Mercer Innovations can revitalize it with our AI integration. The fact that I'm the one executing this rescue, that's just what you always called a fortuitous market opportunity. As I turned to leave, Natalie grasped my arm, her fingers digging in desperately. Wait, please. What's going to happen to us? To our positions? Our livelihoods? I looked directly at my sister, really looked at her. The privileged princess who'd never faced true adversity, who'd had every advantage handed to her on a silver platter, who'd never had to fight for recognition or respect. For a brief moment, I felt an unexpected flicker of compassion. That entirely depends, I said, my voice softening slightly. Are you finally willing to earn your position through actual merit for once in your life? Before anyone could respond, my phone vibrated insistently in my pocket. I glanced at the screen. Dominic, right on schedule as always. I need to take this call, I said, stepping into the hallway where the convention's ambient noise provided some privacy. Dominic, how did the preliminary board member calls go? Even better than our projections, he reported enthusiastically. Nearly 80% are already firmly supporting the acquisition. They've all reviewed the comparative performance metrics. They understand Blackwood Tech cannot survive without our intervention and integration capabilities. Perfect. And the press announcement? Drafted and ready for distribution immediately following Tuesday's board vote. The financial media is already buzzing with acquisition speculation. Your father's resistance to cloud migration and Natalie's catastrophic Blackpad release have made our case extraordinarily compelling to the shareholders. I ended the call and turned to find my mother standing silently in the doorway, her elegant posture betraying the tension she carried. You've anticipated absolutely everything, haven't you? She asked softly, her eyes searching my face. I had no choice, I replied, feeling old resentment stirring. You all taught me quite thoroughly that nothing short of absolute perfection was ever acceptable in the Blackwood family. She visibly flinched at my words. We were terribly wrong, Elise. About so many critical things. Yes, you certainly were. Is there any possibility of repairing what's been broken? Her voice was barely audible over the convention's distant hum. I studied her face carefully, the same face that had watched in silent acquiescence as my father shattered my world 13 years ago. Repair what exactly, Mom? The company, the family relationships? Some damage simply can't be repaired, I continued, feeling a surprising desire to soften my words despite everything. It can only be rebuilt from the foundation up, and meaningful reconstruction requires fundamental change. Back in the conference room, my father had moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the convention floor where he'd once confidently lectured Natalie and me about upholding the prestigious Blackwood legacy in the tech industry. What are your specific terms? He asked without turning to face me, his voice strained. For the company? They're detailed comprehensively in the acquisition documents. For the family. I paused, unexpected emotion catching in my throat. That's considerably more complicated. Natalie looked up from the acquisition papers she'd been frantically reviewing. You're not planning mass layoffs, are you? There are hundreds of dedicated people depending on those positions for their livelihoods. Unlike the current leadership, I genuinely value the employees, I said pointedly. Anyone who demonstrates competence and willingness to adapt will absolutely have opportunities in the reorganized structure. But there will be significant changes, essential ones. And what about us? She asked, her voice uncharacteristically small. That depends entirely on you. Are you genuinely willing to start at entry level? Learn the actual business operations properly from the ground up. Prove through performance that you deserve any leadership position. She nodded slowly, a new humility in her expression. I believe I need that experience. I see that now. Good, because that's your only viable option if you want to remain with the company in any capacity. I turned to my father, steeling myself against the complex emotions his defeated posture evoked. You'll be offered a non-voting advisory board position. No executive authority, no direct management responsibilities. Your decades of industry experience could provide valuable historical perspective. But you won't be making operational decisions anymore. He opened his mouth as if to argue, then closed it again without speaking. For the first time in my life, I witnessed Victor Blackwood, the legendary tech pioneer and tyrant, accept defeat. The board meeting begins at 9:00 a.m. Sharp on Tuesday, I said, gathering my documents. I strongly suggest you all come prepared for the transition announcement. As I reached the door, my mother called out softly, Would you join us for dinner tonight to discuss this further? I turned back, truly looking at my family, really seeing them. My father, proud but visibly shaken. Natalie, frightened but finally beginning to understand reality. My mother, cautiously hopeful but clearly uncertain. No, I said, my voice gentler than I'd intended. Not tonight. We have far too much complicated history for casual family dinners. But perhaps sometime in the future. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of strategy sessions and final preparations. Dominic kept me continuously updated on the board members. Reactions most enthusiastically embracing the acquisition, recognizing it as their best hope to recover their increasingly desperate investments. Monday evening found me in my luxury hotel suite, reviewing the final presentation materials, when my phone lit up with a text from Natalie. Could we meet privately? Just the two of us. Please. I considered ignoring it completely, but something curiosity, perhaps, or some lingering sisterly connection made me respond hotel lobby bar. 30 minutes. Don't be late. She was already waiting when I arrived, nervously nursing what appeared to be an overpriced glass of Cabernet. Thank you for agreeing to meet, she said, as I slid onto the bar stool beside her, her voice thick with genuine gratitude. What do you want from me, Natalie? I asked directly, signaling the bartender. She took a deep, shaky breath, her perfectly manicured fingers trembling slightly around the wine glass. I needed to tell you I'm truly sorry, not just for the current situation, but for everything that happened back then. For not defending you when Dad threw you out. For accepting everything handed to me without questioning the cost. For being exactly the daughter they molded me to be instead of having the courage to be who I should have been. I ordered a whiskey neat, needing the burn to steady my unexpected emotions. And you're only just realizing all this now, when everything's falling apart. No, she admitted, staring into her wine. I've known for years that I was completely overwhelmed, that I wasn't actually qualified for this role. But I was too prideful, too terrified to admit my inadequacy to anyone, especially Dad. So what finally changed your perspective? I asked, studying her face for any hint of manipulation. You did, she said, meeting my eyes directly. Seeing what you've built from nothing, how resilient and visionary you've become, it forced me to recognize what genuine leadership truly looks like. I've been playing a role all these years, but you transformed yourself into something remarkable. I examined my sister carefully, searching for any sign of the practiced charm she'd always deployed to get her way, but all I could see was exhaustion, humility, and what appeared to be genuine remorse. You understand things can never return to how they were before, I said finally, taking a long sip of whiskey. I know that. I don't want them to, honestly. I want. She hesitated, vulnerability evident in her expression. I want to learn. Actually learn, starting from the very beginning. Will you give me that chance? Will you teach me what you know? The following morning, I stood confidently before the Blackwood Technologies Board of Directors, my father and sister seated among them, as I presented Mercer Innovations' comprehensive vision for the integrated companies. I couldn't help but appreciate the perfect symmetry of this moment. 13 years ago, in this very boardroom, my father had declared me unworthy of the family business and dismissed my cloud integration proposal as unrealistic female idealism. Now I was demonstrating exactly what his short-sightedness had cost him. The vote was unanimous, without a single dissenting voice. By noon, Blackwood Technologies was officially incorporated into Mercer Innovations. As the board members filed out, many pausing to congratulate me, my father approached hesitantly. You've won completely, he said simply, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. This isn't about winning or losing, Dad. It's about fixing what's fundamentally broken in the company. And perhaps eventually in our family relationships. He nodded slowly, his shoulders slightly stooped. I severely underestimated you. I was catastrophically wrong about your capabilities. Yes, you absolutely were. The critical question now is, what are you prepared to do about that recognition moving forward? He straightened his shoulders momentarily, and for a brief instant, I glimpsed the passionate innovator who had once patiently taught me about circuit boards before prejudice and pride had poisoned our relationship. I'm going to watch my daughter transform the company I should have entrusted to her 13 years ago, he said quietly. If she's willing to allow me that privilege. It wasn't truly an apology, not a complete one, but it represented a beginning. 6 months later, I sat in what had once been my father's corner office, now my secondary workspace when visiting our Boston operations. Natalie was confidently presenting her detailed analysis of a potential new product line work she'd developed methodically from fundamental market research, starting as a junior analyst exactly as I'd demanded. The comprehensive market data strongly indicates significant demand potential, she concluded professionally, but we need to strategically address these specific production challenges before proceeding. I watched my sister competently handle complex questions from the executive team, demonstrating a thorough grasp of technical details she'd never bothered to understand in her previous role. She was genuinely learning, growing, evolving into the businesswoman she might have become years earlier if everything hadn't been handed to her without effort or merit. After the team dispersed, she lingered behind, a tentative smile replacing her former practice charm. That presentation was effective, right? I incorporated the feedback from last time. It was excellent, I acknowledged sincerely. You've made remarkable progress in just 6 months. Thanks to your demanding standards, she said quietly, gratitude evident in her voice. For giving me an opportunity I definitely hadn't earned. Everyone deserves the chance to prove their actual capabilities, Natalie. Even privileged little sisters who take 13 years to finally mature. She laughed, a genuine, unguarded laugh, not the calculated social titter she'd perfected for industry functions and investor meetings. Mom asked me to remind you about dinner on Sunday. She's been planning the menu all week. I'd attended exactly 3 family dinners in the past 6 months. They remained awkward, still weighted with unresolved tensions and lingering wounds, but they were also undeniably something different. Tentative new beginning. Tell her maybe, I said, turning back to my work. I have numerous urgent projects demanding attention. You always have numerous urgent projects, Natalie pointed out with newfound confidence. But perhaps there's more to life than quarterly projections. Perhaps sometimes a family dinner is simply a family dinner. I looked thoughtfully at my sister. Truly saw her. The entitled princess had vanished, replaced by someone considerably more authentic and substantial. Perhaps, I conceded with a small smile. We'll see. Later that evening, working late in the office, I found myself contemplating an old photograph I kept hidden in my desk drawer, Natalie and me as young girls, before expectations and favoritism had torn us apart. We were smiling innocently, arms wrapped around each other, completely unaware of the painful years of estrangement that lay ahead. My phone vibrated with a message from Dominic. Q3 financial reports finalized. Profits up 47% since acquisition. Blackwood division significantly exceeding all projections. I smiled, reflecting on how far we'd all come. My father was gradually adapting to his advisory role instead of demanding absolute control. Natalie was genuinely earning her position rather than expecting it as birthright. Even my mother was rediscovering her voice, tentatively but persistently. And me? I was learning that sometimes the most satisfying victory isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's showing people precisely what they carelessly discarded, and then perhaps offering them the opportunity to redeem themselves. I picked up my phone and texted Natalie, "Tell Mom I'll be there Sunday, but I'm not committing to staying longer than an hour." Her response appeared almost instantly. "Long enough for dessert? She's making your favorite chocolate raspberry torte from scratch." I thought about our mother trying so earnestly to rebuild broken connections with homemade desserts and Sunday family dinners. About my father swallowing his formidable pride to learn from the daughter he once dismissed as incapable. About Natalie working diligently from entry-level positions without complaint or entitlement. "Fine," I texted back, a small smile playing on my lips. "But exclusively because of the chocolate torte." Some might consider this total victory. I had the company, the success, the vindication I'd worked toward for 13 years. But sitting there, looking at that childhood photograph and contemplating Sunday dinner, I realized something profoundly important. Sometimes the greatest triumph isn't in defeating your opponents, but in giving them the opportunity to evolve into better versions of themselves, even if it requires 13 years and a corporate acquisition to create that possibility.